Hey guys, this is just an iBankerU educational video. So this one is about how money moves typically through the poor, the middle class, and the rich as they get it. So first, the poor. They have a job, they have an income, they have expenses. This could be things like rent, food, auto loan, stuff like that. And they have no assets, but they don't really have liabilities either other than current debt, which is on their credit card statement. So they have income, they have expenses, never accumulate assets, and so you find that you have a little more month than you have paycheck. So it's a struggle, and basically it comes down to no accumulated assets, always working a job, and the expenses being greater than income, so overspending. Next we have middle class, and obviously there are varying stratifications in the middle class, but just by and large speaking, let's say the middle of the middle class. And so the median income in the US right now is somewhere in the $60,000 neighborhood. So say something like that for a family. There's a job, there's a salary, and so there's a bunch of expenses and liabilities, but again, no assets. No 401k, no real savings, probably not even an emergency fund. And so typically most of the middle class, maybe they have a 401k, but no real assets, certainly no way to have your assets get to a point where your dollars from assets make more than your dollars from your job, and so you can stop the rat race. Then we have the rich, and the rich come in many flavors. We don't necessarily mean always a billionaire, but their assets provide more income, so you'll notice there's no real job among the rich. So that said, when your income from your assets is more than what you would have made from a job, that's where you want to go. And now you're out of the rat race. The only job you then have at this point is to be a steward over those assets and make sure that you don't blow them up. And so basically the income coming in is carefully managed, the dollars have a job, and that's to keep growing month over month. So let's talk about essentially how that works among the classes. So we'll go on to the next slide. So if, let's say you've increased a little bit, you've come up in the world, you make about $100,000. $100,000 puts you roughly in the top 14 or 15% U.S. earners. Even so, what you'll find, and this is pre-taxes, so let's say this is $100,000 after taxes, so I'm being even a little bit harsher here. The likelihood is getting lower. But assuming this, probably 50% of your, we'll get into details, but just simply speaking, 50% of your income is just going to go to life. If you do it right, your first year, you'll put together an emergency fund, which will be about 25%. Basically what that means is you'll have at least 3 months of money, so that would be roughly $25,000. And then what you'll do is you'll have another 25% allocated towards asset accumulation. So first, and we'll go to how your expense flow might look. So this is about getting your financial house in order. So at the bottom of your financial house, you have to have job skills that'll even get you to the point where you can get this $100,000. If you get the $100,000, now you can start allocating it. So the first thing you'll do for a foundation, and I've stolen this, that this is available widely all over the internet, but it's a good illustration, so I chose to go with this one. But what I don't see all over the internet is actually allocating the assets where they go here. And so they just say magically do all these things and you'll take care of yourself, but they don't say how much to put. So just generically speaking, about 10% is going to go into insurances, medical insurance, life insurance, auto insurance, and any other insurances like an umbrella. That might make some sense. So if the sub-foundation is your job, and the foundation is to make sure that you don't have a catastrophic event that absolutely wipes you out, it takes roughly 10%, could be less, but let's say it takes around 10% just to keep the math simple. So now we have debt. And so you might have school loans, auto loans, credit card loans, you might have a mortgage or some kind of rent, but you've got some kind of current liability that's due. And so that's your nut you've got to make each month before you can even really start living beyond just shelter and catastrophe insurance. And so the auto will get you so you can get to and from a job. This is not your auto loan. This is your auto insurance and debt pay down. And so you'll put somewhere between about 40% of your money just in your monthly expenses. So if we go back to this illustration, that's this stuff. So then an emergency fund, you don't have to fund it all in 1 year, but at some point you should have at least 3, ideally 6 months saved, so that if something catastrophic happens beyond an insurable event, you are not wiping out your 401ks and your cash and cash equivalents to basically get you through the next emergency, or putting so much on your credit card that the debt kind of wipes you out. So this is your structure. You want, after you paid your debt down and you have your emergency fund, you need cash and cash equivalents. So cash and cash equivalents is basically money in the bank, or tail risk hedges. So tail risk hedges, what happens in the event that there's a general overall failure in the economy, and maybe bank run, something like that. It's unlikely, but something that can hedge against that. It could be cash, it could be precious metals, it could be any number of things, but essentially it's just you don't have to put anything there, but it's something that you could put there. And so that would be about 4% for both of those. So additional money in the bank over and above your emergency fund. And so you'll want to have cash on hand in the case that there's any kind of dip in the market or a buying opportunity. Professional fund managers do this. You can too. And so the idea is that if there's a huge dip, say like in COVID times when everything got cheap, or say like in 2008 when you could buy Bank of America for like a bag of chips, something like that was a good place to have some liquid cash. So you could essentially dollar cost average and lower the overall portfolio cost. So then number 5, this is your roof. This is what most people don't do at all. So this is your non-job income producing assets. So for most people who aren't professional money managers, the 2 largest funds that are invested into are SPY, which tracks the Standard & Poor's 500, something 80% of money managers cannot beat, and QQQ. If you're younger and more aggressive, it has more of a tech tilt, and so it's a very common portfolio. I'm not recommending it. I'm not saying you should do it. I'm just saying these are the most common. And so basically those tend to be the most historically positive places where people put money to grow. So about this, number 5, let's look at that in greater detail. So first off, all of your income producing assets, and really all of your assets, all of your money, it has a job. And so basically the idea is risk management. Uncompensated risk, that's bad. So you don't want to be a gambler. Lottery tickets are not an investment. You know what else isn't an investment? Just unsecured risk. So meme coins, stocks, options that you don't really have an understanding of. Your neighbor told you might be a good idea. That's risky. I mean, I'm not saying you can't do it. It would be beyond my personal risk tolerance, and people do it all the time. It's just those don't tend to have really, for the most part, I'd say Wall Street beating results. And so stocks and equity, their job is to grow. Bonds, these are usually for more senior investors, older investors. The idea is to keep stability, income, and have the ability to draw down. Cash and cash equivalents, these are liquidity and dry powder. Real estate, you could invest in it, not just your personal house, but I'm not suggesting Airbnb. Frankly, I'm kind of against that. But that would be an example of a real estate holding where you could get income from it that could cash flow, but apartment buildings or commercial real estate, say like a strip mall, something like that, would be an example. Gold and silver, precious metals, these would be tail risk hedges. Insurance is about capital preservation. Private assets, probably nothing you're going to be touching as a retail investor, but think like private equity firms or family offices. So they'll buy companies and essentially hold them for a few years, get multiple expansion as the EBITDA grows, and then ultimately sell it. Then, of course, job skills. Nobody really talks about this, but increase your ability to make more money, and you increase your ability to allocate it towards more assets. So now let's talk about that. So your investment house, again, we're moving back to our example of the $100,000 portfolio. So this would be, moving back here, the roof. This is number 5. So this is an exploded view. We're drilling down and looking at what that is. So you'll want some liquid cash, and I'm not saying this should be your portfolio balance, but it would be an example of one. Liquid cash 10%, silver and gold maybe 10%, and again, this is let's say your first year ever doing this, and let's say you had $25,000. So liquid cash, we said, would be somewhere around at least $2,000 of your $25,000 to invest. But we're going to assume in this case that you have a $100,000 portfolio. So not to confuse you, but you have a $100,000 job, you saved for a few years, now this is your portfolio. So you have liquid cash of $10,000, and so let's say that's been 5 years at $2,000 each. You have precious metals, let's say, this is your tail risk hedge, of roughly another $10,000, so $2,000 a year. Me personally, I'm not a crypto fan. Maybe you are. Some crypto investors have been very, 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 very happy with their returns. And so maybe you choose to invest in crypto. It's not for me, but maybe it is for you. In my example, I put 0 here, but you might want to change your personal allocations. Real estate, other than personal homes, I don't have apartment buildings, I don't have strip malls, I don't have Airbnbs. Maybe you want to invest in that, and again, you could change your allocations here. I just choose not to do that. I'm a little bit younger, to the point where I'm not really looking at bonds. There's a whole other discussion to be had about that. If I were going to invest in equities, again, I'm not a fund manager. I'm not expecting to beat the S&P 500, but I am weighting a little more heavily towards tech. So personally, what I've seen a lot of people do is about 2/3 of it goes into SPY, 1/3 of it goes into QQQ or something like it. And so this gives you essentially a broad market core with a growth or tech tilt. And so that would be an example of how to invest funds. And eventually the idea here is to keep this growing, have it appreciate, and hopefully there's enough liquidity and purchasing power in that when it's time for you to retire, you could go the other way and start drawing down assets now that you're not working anymore and you don't have the job that's feeding this flywheel. So that was a long-winded explanation that hopefully is helpful into how to allocate a portfolio. If you found this helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, take care of yourself and each other.